while John's walking up here, I will tell you that because of the number of speakers we have, we're going to limit each speaker to 4 minutes. Mr. Timekeeper, 4 minutes.
Don't bother starting. You got 4 minutes to start. Anything to say? John Cranston, I'm a physician here in Kingston. I've been born in Kingston and grew up here. When I grew up, and up until quite recently, if you were in Kingston, you were one of 2 people. I would sooner die than go to Benedictine, or I would sooner die than go to Kingston. That was just the way that it was, forever and ever and ever. Not because there was anything better or worse one hospital or the other. That is simply the way that it was. Sadly, what I'm seeing now, and I'm reading in the paper, and I'm hearing in conversations is, I'd sooner go to fill in the blank than either hospital in Kingston. You're talking about cutting back on services. You're talking about the fact that we're losing people. That's true. And my question is, why? And I know that overall hospitals are in that situation, and yet I look in the newspaper and I see local area hospitals are enlarging. They're putting in new buildings, they're putting in new services, and we are sitting there and watching it just trickle away, trickle away, trickle away. We're responding to it by cutting back on services rather than, it seems, looking at the problem of why are we losing the services? Why aren't people staying in Kingston? And I think that's an issue that we have to look at. All the other processes, to having to cut back on staff, whether we use this building or that building or whatever else it may be, sort of becomes secondary if we have no patients. Okay? If we just keep watching people go to Northern Dutchess and going down to Vassar Brothers or going to Albany or going to wherever, our problems are solved. Unfortunately, we also don't have a hospital. So what is being done about finding out why people are leaving this area? And this predates the nonsense about whether we're going to use this building or that building or whatever. It's been a process that over the past few years has become more and more and more obvious. And sadly now, with the division that's occurring about whether this hospital will stay open, that hospital will stay open, both hospitals, neither hospital, whatever, that has been aggravated tremendously. But do you people look in the paper at the letters to the editor and the things that are said about both hospitals? If I was on the board, I'm on a medical staff, but I will be very honest, I haven't been to a medical staff meeting in years, and I don't plan on starting because I usually disagree with what goes on there. But the fact of the matter is, somebody better be paying attention to our audience. All right? The people that we depend on, if you want, our customers. I prefer to call them patients, but if you want to call them as a business, customers, we're losing them. They're going elsewhere. And somebody better wake up and figure out why and do something about it, or our problems are all going to be taken care of for us.
John, you're a surgeon, right?
Yes, I am.
How'd you get patients?
Pardon?
How'd you get patients?
I'm not sure what you mean.
How did a patient come to you?
Sure as hell wasn't because of my good looks, I'll tell you that. Most of it is word of mouth. The best.
They were referred to you from a primary care physician?
Some.
Okay.
The majority, no.
You know what? Rather than have an exchange, if Dr. Cranston can state, I think I've understood his question. We'll let the panel.
Okay. Well, what I was the point I was getting at is that a lot of surgical procedures and specialists get their patients referred from primary care physicians. A large number of the primary care physicians in this area have now joined larger groups. Some of those larger groups are associated with other health systems in the area, and they're probably encouraged to send some of their patients to the other area. So I can only ask that the people in this community speak up for themselves. If they want to be treated in their community, they should speak to their primary care physicians and say, I prefer to stay in my community to have my procedure done.
And you have to give something to the primary care physician that makes them want to keep people here. That's my point. That's my point. Whether people are going elsewhere, whether it's because their group they joined sends them there or whatever, they have no incentive to stay here. All they have is complaints. Some of them are justified, many of them are not. I read some of the things in the paper, I'm saying to myself, this is not the hospital that I work in. This is just some ding-dong who wants to go off on a rampage. God bless him, let him go off of it. Ignore those people. But there's many people who have been supporters of this hospital are now saying, no, I'm going somewhere else. I'm going to St. Francis, I'm going to Vassar. We can't compete with Albany Med. We can't compete with Westchester. That's not our place in the system. I understand that. But we can compete with the local hospitals. And it's a competition that we're losing. somebody better find out why. Stop the clock.
So, in addition to the actual way this proceeds, how a patient winds up in the hospital or not, I think Dr. Cranston's other point is, why are we not addressing the loss of market share in some other way? And if we are, please tell the community how that's being done.
When the alliance came together, we measured the market share. It was at 50%. It says that half of our market was going elsewhere. Over the last 3 years, we've gained 2 points. That's a small amount, but we've not gotten worse in the last 3 years. And the issue about quality of care is one reason that we're providing proof that we do provide good care. In my opinion, based on what I've seen, it's important that we work very closely with our physicians to be sure that they feel supported, and we continue to do that on a regular basis, and we will continue to do that going forward. We provide, if you look at the services provided, they are very good, and we do encourage our community to use the services locally. Why? 4 or 5 years ago, 50% of the market went elsewhere. It's an accumulation of, I think, a misunderstanding of the quality of the care that was provided by both hospitals over the years. Part of our responsibility is to help educate and develop an appreciation for truly the quality of care. That is the essence. If you feel you'll get good care in your local hospital, you will come. And that's our charge, is to help educate the community in that regard.
In regards to out-migration, boy, as long as I've, at least 10 years, and I guess not very effectively, out-migration is something that the organizations have looked at and scratched our head. You know, we had a very competitive model in this community for a long time. You know, we had 2 hospitals and competing for equipment, for physicians, for employees, back and forth, hitting each other over the head. This month, one's up, one's down. What do you think that does for out-migration? So there's a long history here before the last couple of years. So out-migration has been a serious concern of the board, of administration, for a long time. And I can only say to you that it is a challenge that is a very difficult one to be successful.
I'm going to try to relate some statistics. I'm not entirely certain of the numbers, but I'm definitely certain of the trend of which I speak. My reference point is 1994. In 1994, I got involved in changing the malpractice insurance rates for Ulster County. We were the highest in the state. We were in category 1. We got it amended so that we were in category, I think it was 3 or 4. The reason, one of the many reasons, but one of the key reasons we were able to do so is that when the insurance companies took a good hard look at it, they said, we don't want to upset the apple cart over just a handful of doctors. At the time, a handful of doctors was 280 practicing physicians, 240 actively practicing physicians who called Ulster County the primary base of their practice. My understanding is that we have something around 100 physicians claiming Ulster County as their base of practice. Is that an accurate rendition of, as the primary base of their practice? In other words, I remember at the time one doctor in particular who did 49% of his practice in Ulster County and 51% of his practice in Dutchess County because he was in a high-risk category when it came to medical malpractice insurance. So he was not primarily based in Ulster County. But the doctor who did do 51% was. Is that an accurate rendition of what's happening in the medical community? Have we lost resident physicians who are using this community as the primary base of operation?
I cannot speak to the number of 100. Our active medical staff between the 2 hospitals, it's much greater than that. over the 200, close to the 300 mark for that, but I can't speak to what their primary area of practice is.
Is it possible, even likely, that some of them consider another community like Dutchess County their primary area of practice?
Can't give you a positive answer.
All right. It is a serious problem in that if we know one of the causes is that physicians drive patients and patients make choices based upon where their physician sends them, if we don't have the physicians at the front end who are making those recommendations, we're not going to get the patients at the back end to support our hospitals. Some of the other health systems in the Hudson Valley have transformed their organizations into one that is actually providing outpatient care. The hospital is sort of the less significant portion of the institution in terms of their growth patterns. Is that a model that the Health Alliance has or is considering pursuing?
We're looking at a variety of models, and that being one, is to capture the outpatient market by working closer with our physicians. You can employ the physicians, which is a very expensive venture, or we can align with them a term called clinical integration. But these are the two models that appear to be nationwide the most successful in working in a setting up a platform to work very closely with the physicians. Yes, we have looked at those, and we will continue to look at ways to align with and help the physicians as well as the hospitals come together, working closely with our payers as well to create a community health model.
Dr. Cranston made another very important point. He said that what he reads about in letters to the editor or listening on the radio do not resemble the hospitals where he works. That sounds to me like a public relations problem. In spite of the fact that you have a whole slew of awards over there listed on the boards, there have been some very public discussions about, for example, the deployment of the emergency department when that occurred. And I know you've addressed this in previous forums, but what is the Health Alliance doing to counteract inaccurate statements about the quality of care that may impact other people's decision making?
Well, it starts with each individual experience. It's talk is cheap. What we have to concentrate on is every patient experience being as good as it possibly can be, but it also establishes relationships with the physicians to align with and help them in their practices, as well as educating the community through awareness of things of that nature, explaining our services, getting out into forums that would allow us to explain the breadth of our services as well as the depth. We have over 80 primary care physicians, and we have a very good representation of specialists. And I believe part of it is educating the community on and to be aware of the quality of services that are here, and that's our challenge. And we see that, and certainly that's something that we have been doing and we will continue to do going forward.
One last question before we go to the next person, but also following up on Dr. Cranston's points. Is the Health Alliance organization the same organization, only current, that was the hospital where my dad went when he had a car accident, where my grandmother went when she had a heart attack, and where my cousin went when he had a problem with his back and he fell off the roof? Is it the same hospital, or do you actually send people elsewhere?
We are not, say, a trauma center, and that there's certain criteria clinically that we are here to stabilize. We had 2 instances recently in which it was trauma, but due to circumstances that did not allow that patient to go to a trauma center, they were brought to our emergency department, successfully treated and stabilized, and then we were able to transfer beyond that. Absent that, we can treat in our emergency department just about anybody that would need the care, and we collaborate with other centers and would transfer as appropriate. But for the most part, we have orthopedists, we have neurologists with our stroke center, we have cardiologists in our chest pain center, And we have urologists, we have specialties that can treat just about anything that we see coming to our emergency department. And then, of course, one of the things is to raise the awareness of the overall hospital services for other than emergency cases. So education is probably the biggest.
So it's a different place.
It is. It's evolved, and as it must, in order to adjust to the changes.
Do you want it to be a different place, or do you want it to be the same place?
I want to know whether it's a different place. I have my own intuition about what it is and isn't. I suspect that hospitals in the 21st century are much more highly specialized, and that the opportunity for advanced care that exists today in specific facilities did not really exist back in the day. And that's why some patients might be going elsewhere, which is a legitimate good healthcare reason. On the other hand, there is the general function of hospitals. So I don't have an opinion, doctor. I'm just curious to hear somebody articulate whether it's true or not.
But I also think that you need to want to have your hospital to be different, because the provision of health care is different today than it was in the 1990s that you referenced. And I think that you need to consider the fact that if you had a relative who was in the hospital for a heart condition, that relative might have spent 10 days in the hospital in the 90s, and they might spend 2 days or 3 days, if at all, in the hospital today. Same thing with flu. How many people have been hospitalized in the last few years because of flu? Very few, unless you're very debilitated from another disease. People aren't hospitalized because of the flu, because they have flu vaccines. So the use of hospitals is changing, as well as the way the services are provided. And we have to change with that. And when you compare us, and I think unfairly, as Dr. Cranston did in some cases, when you compare us to other facilities, you are comparing us to other facilities in other communities. And I don't like to use this as an excuse, but you need to understand that those other facilities are reimbursed for the services that they provide at a different rate than we are in Ulster County. So if you want to be mad, you can be mad about what we get paid for our services. And because we get paid less, we have to make adjustments that they do not have to make. I also think that you should be aware that those hospitals, while they may be building facilities, some of which are offices for their doctors, who they hire, which we do not, they also are not increasing their number of beds, because the future is that the number of hospital beds in every community will be reduced, because again, reimbursement nationwide is being reduced, and primary care physicians are being encouraged to treat their patients in their offices and not refer them to the hospitals. So those are all challenges and all changes that make a difference as to how healthcare is delivered and how we have to adjust. And we are adjusting, as we are telling you about, to the changing provision of healthcare.
Believe it or not, we're going to our second speaker, Ed Olin. Go to my left. It's not hard.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Ed Olin, and I'm a local pharmacist, and I've been in Ulster County since 1973. Let me just begin by saying we need the Health Alliance to be successful for our communities. And I know many of us will be available to help any way that we can. When I look at the date that we're looking for the Health Department to come back with approval of the consolidation, it's going to probably be in the early 2014. That's just about the time when the Affordable Care Act really kicks in with the expansion of so many different benefits and opportunities. Communities all over America are dealing with that reality. And I know, Mr. Lindquist, you were just recently appointed to one of the advisory committees for one of the regional insurance co-op. And it was nice to see one of the representatives of the Health Alliance at the recent information technology meeting down in Westchester. And I wonder, with all the energy that has to go into the consolidation and keeping your spirits up, which is really tough, and I've been in both roles, how are we going to be ready for health reform, especially so inequitable. How are we going to be ready for health reform with medical homes? Are we looking at the ACOs joining other organizations? So if you can talk to us how we will be prepared for those opportunities. Because if we are too far behind the curve, and if we don't have the resources to invest in the infrastructure, then let's be straight. And then let's start to look at regional alliances that will allow us to accelerate so we can be competitive. Because if we are not ready for health reform in this country, especially in the state of New York, where there might be an increase of 3 million people under Medicaid, we're going to lose big. And all the other discussions are all secondary. So we got to be honest. If we can be ready, and if we can't, let's align with other organizations that can help us. Thank you.
Anybody want to respond? Are we ready for healthcare reform, national healthcare reform in New York?
We've been, several members of our board as well as executive team have been involved in a variety of different statewide initiatives. We've also worked with the payers, and we're very active at that level. Obviously, our main priority at this point is to get our house in order so that we can be an active, viable partner in those efforts. We've not abandoned them. We do participate in these different committees and councils that are reshaping healthcare, and we intend to be on the front edge of that. We have a dual responsibility as well to get our house in order so that we can be viable enough to support it.
You know, we see this spitting contest at the national level, spitting, even more politely, at the national level on what healthcare reform is all about, but there seems to be one point on which there is agreement, and that is that if we're going to save $750 billion, $750 billion, we're going to save it out of the hides of providers. As you go forward and you make your plans for the 21st century healthcare institution, are you cognizant and are you factoring in the fact that you're going to be experiencing significant reductions in your reimbursement?
We have already begun to see that, and that we had talked about earlier with it is driving what we're doing now. We know that more are coming. And to get also to the previous comment, we are looking outside our single organization for alliances with others so that we can look at regional health care as opposed to just a single community. In that model, you can share resources and support the communities within that region. And we're very active as well in that regard.
Just to give people a sense of what the local impact here in Ulster County is, our healthcare economy in Ulster County from the public side is essentially $1 billion. That's about what we spend in public money here in healthcare in this county. So what happens at the national level, what happens at the state level has a very significant impact about what happens here locally. Our next speaker is Janice Traynor, who identified herself as part of the Pardon me?
I have no voice, so.
Janice is going to pass. I will tell you that she is a member of the New York State Nurses Association, so thank you for coming and participating. Next, we have Vincent Fiero. Fiero?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a very brief comment that I was appalled to read a public comment by one of the sisters from
next speaker, we are now up to people who are here for multiple times, so that's good news. Next one will be Frank Ambrose.
My name is Frank Ambrose. I've been here for the board before, spoke before the group. I sent a letter in, there's a letter of paper. Part of the design of what I said has come true, but there's problems. I put out a bubble. I put out something that people could just grab onto and look at and say, what pieces work, what pieces don't work. Some were beyond belief. My problems with the board and with how we proceed is this community, this taxpayer base put out $4 million for an ambulatory building. Gave everything, all the time to one subject. We're now talking about the general health of our community and how we can support the general health, the heart problems, the diabetes. And I don't see any real concrete way that you've assured us that this alliance will be able to draw enough in the next years in one facility to benefit that health, so that what you're going to do is move all facilities into one building. You're going to bring all procedures into one area. I have some expression that I heard a veiled threat of, we're going to bring in ambulatories and they're going to be here. And we're going to look at ambulatories outside and influence the closing of those so that you have to come into our facility. There's been a thought in this community. We, a faith community, don't want this procedure. Okay. Other people want the procedure. I have nothing against them. They're wonderful people. We have our right, they have their right. How it will be expressed to you is your rate will go up to 60%. We will leave. We will go to St. Francis. We will go to Albany if we can make it. Now we are aging and getting older. I beg of you to please look at even outsourcing that facility. We taxpayers are willing to, okay, sell it to somebody at a cheap rate to run it. Only bring your facility into a more general health area. And you can talk about reimbursements, and I know our legislator has. The driving force that you have in the next 2 years, probably by the end of 2013, is not Obamacare, because hopefully it will be gone. What you have is sitting before you is a massive increase in the inflation rate in the United States. We are printing money with nothing behind it. It has to bust. And when it breaks, healthcare costs at inflationary rates will be way out of line. The other thing is, I really would love to see you fight with the health department, because at 150 beds, you're only going to end up as Ellenville Hospital, not as something larger. So those are my concerns, and I really, really think that if you don't want to see a mass exodus, you should try to look at different ways to facilitate that service that you so deeply love and want to proceed in Kingston.
Frank is suggesting that services that you've talked about as being mandatory in order to pass health department muster could be provided to the community in a way that some segments of the community would find less offensive if they were outsourced and provided by private individuals. And much like other health care in this community is provided by other individuals, and that's part of the problem here. Is there a reaction to that point?
Different than what we reacted to before.
move closer to the mic?
We've responded to that issue in the past, and we don't know what the solution could or would be. We don't know what the proposal is. I mean, we're doing what we think we have to do in this community to preserve healthcare in the only way we know how. We're listening to what people are asking us to do, but there's no market to outsource abortions, and that's what we're talking about here. But we've already indicated that in this community, abortions aren't being done because there's no physician to provide abortions. So I don't know what somebody wants today.
So I guess the question.
Can you refine the question, or
I
can you
think
tell
the
me
question
more of
was,
what?
I think you hit it. Why don't you outsource it? And your response, Frank, please. The question was, why don't you outsource it? Why don't you sell the facility at a loss, or whatever it takes to get it off your back? And your response was, there is no market for that facility or the provision of that service outside of a community-based hospital.
Correct.
Okay. I think that's the answer. You don't have to like it, Frank, but that's the answer. We have our first tweeted question. And boy, it's really good to be able to ask questions without having to show your face here. This person's name is Lizzie, and she's watching on TV. I don't think it's my sister, Lizzie. In fact, I know it's not, because she wouldn't ask this question. But it's a reasonable question. Why do we need so many higher-ups making so much money in salaries, and there's only 150 beds?
Actually, there are 300 beds in the hospital currently, so that does change the perspective a little bit. We are anticipating that we will reduce.
Speak up a little bit.
I hear you. I'm speaking into the microphone. This is not working. Is this better?
No.
I don't think we have mics.
Yeah, you do. You just have to speak
Yeah.
a little louder.
Put it closer.
Better? We have 300 beds, not 150. We are, as we indicated, constantly looking at staffing, and we're looking at staffing from the top to the bottom constantly, and looking at what needs to be available for patient care and what needs to be available for efficient and appropriate running of the hospital. Ultimately, as I've said before, that is the responsibility of the CEO is to look at staffing. The responsibility of the board is to hire the CEO. We take those responsibilities seriously at all levels, and we continually monitor the most effective use of the dollars that we have to spend. And if you think that we have made the wrong decisions, I appreciate your concern, but we are constantly looking and reviewing and looking back and looking forward as to whether or not we have made the right decision. So I know that the salaries that we pay are a bone of contention in this community, but I will tell you that they are a bone of contention in every community when it comes to healthcare providers. And we have to deal with it. We are dealing with it, and there is no level of expense in the organization that is without review.
Mr. Lundquist, earlier on in your introductory remarks in response to one of my questions about the layoffs, you talked about the cutting back. Can you describe, you said they were not part of the medical staff, they were not part of the nursing staff. Can you describe where some of those layoffs came from?
Came from a variety of different areas within our organization, and what we're looking at is the service structure. Many of them are leadership positions in which we continue to consolidate services, and that includes consolidating services under fewer leadership individuals. We look at all services to be sure that we have the appropriate level of staff, and if the volume is down, then we can't continue to keep the staff accordingly. And we've adjusted and reduced at all levels of the organization. And we will continue to look at ways for us to get that accomplished. That is always, every day, a concern of ours, and something that, as we go forward, we'll continue to make the necessary changes.
I will accept none of your damn business as the answer to this question. Have there been reductions in executive salaries?
Yes,
Okay, so the answer is yes?
yes,
The answer is not, it's none of my business?
there have been reductions.
Thank you. The next person just left the room, they'll be back momentarily. So we'll go to the person after that, and that's Jack Brewer. Mr. Chairman, where did I get that title?
I think one of our problems is typified by this setting this evening. I was sitting in the fourth row, I think, and both of my hearing aids are being repaired. So I'm not a judge about whether the people in the back of the room can hear what's going on up here. But my perception is that there's been a conversation going back and forth here between the panel and the chairman, and there's a problem of communication with the back of the room. And I think the community, in this case, is the back of the room. Kevin talked about the dichotomy between health and abortion. I think there's a different way of analyzing our problem, and that's between the similarity and the sharedness of life and health. I think those two concepts offer an opportunity for us to get through this conflict of we will never accept this or that. But I do think that the concept of life and respect for life is built into our tradition, at least. Maybe society has changed, and that is not, those traditions are not useful anymore. Some people may feel that way. The other thing is that there is a major second issue, I think, in terms of communication between ourselves. And that is the problem of secrecy versus transparency. And I've been trying very hard, and I know that Mr. Lundquist has been trying hard in his way to bridge that gap. But the gap that he wants to bridge is different than the information that I want to hear from him. That information has to do with what has worked in the past and how it's worked, and if it didn't work, get it out on the table, and that will help us to go forward into how to make it better. But I don't think we've bridged that gap yet. I just want to share with you, I had only one thing that someone else asked me to talk about tonight, and that is to get the regulation, the health regulation, that said that we have to have abortion in our one hospital city. I still don't have an answer to that question. It's been on the table for a while. And I don't care what that regulation number, whatever it is, or somebody's opinion, or whatever. But it ought to be out on the table from Albany down to here, so we can deal with it. Over in Dutchess County, they have 3 hospitals that I know of, maybe 4. None of them does abortions, as far as I know. But Planned Parenthood does surgical abortions in Dutchess County. I've been informed. I think that's true. If it isn't, then I'm, out of left field. But the point is that things work in other areas that you're telling us can't work here, won't work here. And I think that's very sad. I think that asking about the operations of this system at present, asking for the data as a preparation for going ahead, was the way to go. And now, I think I went to Albany and put in a foil or 2, And what the Department of Health and the state told me with 2 letters was that you have to wait 96 days before we can give you an answer. There's something wrong with that. That's a political answer. Wait 96 days before you can get a look at the preliminary proposal that has been offered to us as a kind of a chimera, a vision. Something out there that's this and that, very general descriptions of our problem. So I would say that we have to bridge that gap. And if there is a regulation or a rule or a point of view in the state health department, get it out on the table and who's responsible for it? Who spoke? Who told you? Was it Planned Parenthood or was it the state health department? You have to bridge those gaps, Dave.
As I see it, Jack raised 4 points. And the first one, I think, was a statement of his position regarding the question of reproductive services and abortion. The second one was generally secrecy versus transparency. I've asked this question of you before in other forums, and I've asked you that question here again today. But can you give us a short answer as to why absolutely everything you're doing is not done in public, why the board meetings are not open to the public, why every document that's being exchanged is not available to the public? Can you explain why that is the case as succinctly as you possibly can?
Kevin, would you ask the panelists to move the mics up in front close
Yes,
so
Jack.
they can speak clearly?
Yes, I will ask them to do that as well. Dave, that's not one of ours. Use the one next to it.
I think that to open all meetings to the public, to discuss the needs of the healthcare needs of this community. It's a complex issue. We have 120 members of our community on our boards. So it is a very well-represented organization that is very much covered and supported, and we benefit from the talent and the expertise of our board members. So it is far from being hidden. We gain from that expertise and certainly to the benefit of everyone. To open it up to the public would only draw things out much, much longer in just explaining very basic things. And that's the best way I know how to describe it, is it's not practical.
Second question. What regulation says that we have to have abortion services? Is there a specific regulation? Do you know the number? Can you tell Mr. Grogan what that number is? And if there is no regulation, why is it something that is perceived by the board to be a mandate?
We've actually had that exact conversation with the Department of Health this week. And we said to them, we are working under the assumption that the issues that were raised in the Berger Commission are the same issues that we have to address in this community as we go forward. Would you go back and review what the Berger Commission told us we had to do in this community, and with the understanding that the Foxhall facility is not financially viable, what will your position be when we apply for a CON? We don't have an answer, but we understand that the community wants that particular answer, and we've asked Department of Health as well. We'll see what they say.
So
We
the
did
answer
not
is-
get an immediate answer.
The answer is you have not been advised by your attorneys that there's a regulation that you have to comply with. There is no across-the-board standard. It is part of the certificate of need process that you go before the Department of Health. They lay out conditions which are unique to a community, and you believe you have to comply with them. But you have not reached the conclusion yet in this process that the Department of Health is mandating that service.
We know that when the Berger Commission mandated the alliance, which said that either we would come together, reduce beds, provide full reproductive services in the community, or they would close a hospital, we know what they said then. And we know that they accepted the solution of Foxhall as the solution for providing full reproductive services. We are now in a situation where Foxhall is not viable. So we are asking them, what will your requirement be? And they are saying to us, the requirements that were imposed by Berger still exist. But we are trying to get clarification on exactly what their position will be, because we know that the community wants to know. We believe that we are working in a way in which the DOH will expect us to work, but we are trying to get them to specifically tell us what their position is.
Let me, Cynthia, just to illuminate that process a little more. Is the process one where you then would say to the Department of Health, under what authority do you say that, or is the process more collaborative?
Well, the Department of Health always looks, from my perspective, from the experience that I've had with the Department of Health, which is obviously limited because I am not a career hospital administrator in New York State. But what I see them doing is looking at the provision of health care in a community. And if some level of health care is not going to be available, or the facility wishes to eliminate or even increase a level of health care, they will look at where else it is provided to that community, whether it's in that same county, whether it's in that same city, whether it's within a certain mile radius, and they will make a determination as to whether or not it's appropriate or inappropriate. And they have to look at that in perspective of all services. And I have to assume that they will look at it with respect to women's reproductive services as well. But
So
we are asking that question.
So-
What are your rules, and what do you anticipate that you will be required of us?
Let's use a less inflammatory issue.
Good.
Dialysis. If dialysis is provided elsewhere in the community and the Department of Health determines that the dialysis services that are available in the community, would they then likely require the hospital also to provide dialysis services?
Well, I don't think that they would be, the Department of Health wouldn't take a proactive position in that case. What they would do is, if we went to them and said, we have done, and this is an example, please do not say or do not report that we are eliminating anything. But if we went to the Department of Health and said, we are currently providing dialysis services, and that is a service that we would like to eliminate for whatever reason, they would say to us, where else is that service offered? How will the patients who need that service get to that location? How will they get that service? So they look at the provision of service as a community, and they will make their determinations accordingly.
So, correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm exaggerating the point. In your estimation, anybody on the panel who's dealt with the Department of Health and the rules and regulations under which they exist and impose upon you, are they viewing hospitals as the providers of last resort for services that otherwise are not being provided in the community?
I will speak to our situation, and they are absolutely looking at, you have to remember that in New York State, hospitals are all not-for-profits. And as a result, if someone presents to us through our emergency room and needs service, we have no ability to turn them away, whether or not they are insured or not. So they constantly will look at what's the makeup of your population, who has insurance, who does not, what are your providers, and what services does the population need. And they will look at that, whether it involves maternity, substance abuse, behavioral health, general medical services, but they look at that and say, that's a service the community needs. Are you the only provider, or are there multiple providers? If you walk away from that market, what will happen to the community as a whole?
Thank you for that. Let me just see if I have the last question we don't have to answer. Take a break. Jack asked about the response by the Department of Health that he's going to have to wait 96 days. Jack, I know know there are regulations that agencies have, I'm sorry, I'll speak a little loud. I know there are regulations that agencies have to follow in order to respond to freedom of information requests. My guess is, without having seen the letters that you got, is they were acknowledging your letter, which is required by law, and telling you the ultimate time frame that could take for them to respond. My experience has been that that number is not real, that in most instances you will receive a response in due course. In some instances, that deadline will be exceeded by a long, long way.
May I say just 2 sentences? The decision in Albany is about releasing, that is my perception, and my request, releasing what is now a public document in a way. I know there's no, magic answer with FOIA systems. They find a reason if they want to. That's the way it works.
Okay.
But the other thing is that making a decision about whether this should be open to the community, I think, is an arrogant way to look at the community.
Okay, Jack, I'm not asking you to reopen your chance to speak. So,
In
no,
that
no,
case, I don't want to
please,
prolong
no,
the
Jack,
situation.
Jack,
And I can't hear what you're saying.
I'm going to ask you to sit down so that we have other
So
people.
I
to
appreciate
speak.
your help.